we'll let other people roll in. I want to maximize time for sharing knowledge and learning and having a good discussion. So I appreciate everyone that's here, and we're going to let more people roll in. We are recording this session just so we can share it in posterity with some other people. I'm Adam, and I will be your moderator for this session. But before I get into it, I'm actually going to hand it over to Adam Torres to tell you a little bit about this event, and then we'll get going.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here this afternoon, and together with the team at Workit, put on this great event from Colorado Product. Those that aren't familiar with Colorado Product, we are now officially a 501c charity organization that is focused on developing the practice of product management and promoting product in the Boulder, Denver area primarily. We've been in operations for 10 years now in different forms, and Workit, which I'll let Adam share more about, is our latest sponsor. And we're really excited to have them because they have a lot of similar goals to Colorado Product and helping people advance their careers in product management. So Adam, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you want more information about Colorado Product, check us out at coloradoproduct.com. We do monthly events just like this, and we have a Slack community and a lot of other great resources for the local community.
Yeah, lots of jobs flying around on there today and yesterday I saw, so it's good. So welcome everybody. I'm Adam Zolak. I will be your moderator and cruise director today. I am a program manager with Workit, and so if you haven't heard of Workit, you can check it out. It's workit.com. You got to do it twice. And Workit is a modern career accelerator. So we've thought a lot about how people thrive and grow professionally, and learned a lot about what works and what doesn't. And we're really excited about the power of people connecting to support each other's growth. So we're designing a series of cohorts around that. Our first launching this fall around product management. And as many of you may know, as product managers, right, it's we're always thinking about how to make better products and help our businesses and help our customers. And often it leaves little time for ourselves at the end of the day. And so I'm just really excited about making a space sort of like the one we're going to see here today, where people can support each other and share ideas and really help each other to grow and thrive and achieve the hard but really rewarding things that we want to do in life. So check it out, Workit. And we're definitely looking for some trailblazers for this first cohort. And I think it's going to be a really cool opportunity for folks that are maybe a little geeky and passionate about personal growth and want to be part of co-creating that. So without further ado, welcome to our session today, Beyond Delivery, Making Time for Discovery and Iteration. I think this is a really important topic. I know a lot of product managers I've talked to can struggle with this. I know Melissa Perry wrote Escaping the Build Trap, which sort of talks about this a little bit too. Delivery is obviously a very important part of what we do as product managers, but at the same time, there can be more. There can be more ways to have an impact. There can be more things that we want to do individually as product managers. And so the question is, how does delivery not become the only thing we do? And so I'm really excited to be joined by some really awesome folks, some of which are mentors with Workit and are going to be supporting our program. And I'll let folks introduce themselves in more detail here in a sec. I just do want to have one note about our format today. We're going to have a panel discussion. So back and forth, some of our panelists, might jump in and add to what each other are saying or sort of add clarifying questions. I may do the same. If you have questions in the audience, please put them in the chat. And the way we're going to try and do it is we're going to try and take questions within the topic so we don't run out of time at the end. And so we're going to try and pick one or two questions. I might just ask someone out there in the audience to read your question. I'd love it if you'd come off mute and read it, just so you express it the way you meant it to be asked. But if you don't want to, I'll ask it for you. And then we'll try and get to a couple great topics so we can explore beyond delivery from a few different perspectives. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm just going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, their current role and company, maybe a few choice points they'd like to share. And then in the interest of our talk today, what's one interesting thing that you've delivered, good, bad, or otherwise? your choice. So we're going to kick it off here with Adam Torres joining us as the staff PM from Twitter.
Hi, everybody. As Adam, staff PM at Twitter. I've been at Twitter for 7 years now. I'm also the president, one of the co-founders of Colorado Product. The most interesting thing that I've shipped was probably a API solution to allow researchers to study COVID-19 and the conversation that's happening on Twitter during the pandemic. So it was used by a lot of researchers, government agencies, et cetera, to like understand the spread and different dynamics around the virus.
Very cool. All right, and now over to Justin.
So hi everyone, Justin Williams, Director of Product at Bigger Pockets. We're a community-based company of 2 million plus real estate investors. We help folks achieve some flexibility in their lives by getting passive income through real estate investing. And I started way back in the day as a user experience designer before it was even a real career or job field, but quickly found my way to the dark side of product. And interesting thing that I've launched is previous gig, but we launched a way to buy workers comp insurance online for small businesses. And kind of the key thing we figured out was to use natural language processing so people could just say, hey, I sell taco emoji, and they get their insurance on their phone in under a few minutes.
I love that. I wanna make a taco truck just so I can do that. And last,
You should.
and our third panelist, Allegra Bishop.
Yeah, hey, I'm Allegra Bishop. I'm a consulting product manager at VMware. Like a lot of people in product, I've kind of worked all over the place. I've worked in manufacturing, GovTech, clinical research, health tech, and now I work at VMware in part of it called Tanzu Labs. It used to be called Pivotal Labs, if anyone on the call is familiar with that. So a lot of coming into companies and actually helping them to do what we're talking about in the panel today. So focus on a little bit more than just delivery, delivering well, but also thinking about how to do discovery well and iterate and all that good stuff. Since you said good, bad, or otherwise for delivery, I worked at a company and I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced this, but I was handed something that was kind of expected to be delivered when I started from the person who had kind of passed that role down onto me. I really didn't think that it was the best idea. It was also a feature that was going to take about 10 months. So that whole delivery, it was really an opportunity for me to stop and say, hey, why don't we break this down into smaller iterations? Spend the time instead of just plowing forward with 10 months worth of work, spend that time and break it down a little bit, do more research. Ended up with about a 3-month project instead, 3-month feature, and it brought a lot more value. So it was good and bad and otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'd love to, as we explore delivery and things beyond delivery, I'd love to maybe hear more about that. So I think as our first topic, it's really like let's talk about delivery and what is beyond delivery before we sort of talk about like, what's valuable and how do you make more time for it. Just if one of our panelists wants to start us off and talk about what is delivery and what is beyond delivery, and then maybe the other panelists can come in and sort of compare and contrast and add to that so we can get a fuller picture of like what we're actually talking about today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start having worship at the Church of Marty Kagan and all things Silicon Valley Product Group. But I think delivery is just like Allegra said, right? It's really, you're taking somebody else's idea, you're more or less being told what to build from the leadership team, usually in the form of an annual roadmap, and you're doing the best you can with it, right? So in her case, it was getting it down to a smaller scope, but it's just getting, the company's telling you what to do and you're doing the best version of that you can. And then beyond delivery is where you're actually being asked to solve a business problem and you're being held accountable, usually by the form of progress toward a metric. So the most common ways companies do this is, I'm sure you've all heard of OKRs. So you can think about there's much more scope and responsibility because you're not only on the hook for moving the metric, but you kind of have to come up with the ideas and figure out which ideas to pursue and which ideas not to pursue. So it's a whole another level of product management.
Yeah, for sure. Other thoughts? Like what else is delivery? What else is beyond? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think of delivery as the introductory product role, whether it's a product owner role or a junior introductory product manager role, like there is a problem in the product manager titling and career path around differentiation between product manager, product owner, and people doing different things or giving different responsibilities to those roles. But delivery is the product owner responsibility or role, and going beyond delivery is the growth projection or progression, I should say, of a product manager. So as you move from an introductory product manager or a product owner to senior product manager and beyond, like that is when you begin to master those skills that go beyond delivery alone.
Yeah. Allegra, any other thoughts or?
Sure. I mean, I would definitely agree with Adam. It depends on your role, right? If you're a product owner, you're probably pretty good at delivery and you're probably focusing on, a lot of Scrum ceremonies or, if you look at your shirt, Adam Z, a lot of Kanban, testing, communicating release plans to some extent, documenting changes, timing the releases. There's certainly a lot of that. I think for me, what really unlocked the difference between delivery and moving beyond delivery is really truly understanding the value of what you're delivering, right? It's actually pretty easy, especially at bigger companies, to fall into the trap of delivering things because, it's in your backlog and you know what you're supposed to deliver and you just move it forward because you're really good at working with engineers. You're really good at working with designers, you're good at prioritizing writing stories. But it's that next level when you start to have it click, not only what's the value of these stories, but then being able to determine, what you should build next because of the value that it provides. That's kind of what I think about it.
I'm curious, like, keeping that train of thought going, like if you are in a delivery role, like what are mindsets or actions or other things you can do to maybe start moving yourself beyond delivery before anybody is asking you to do that? Like, what are some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can start again. Hopefully y'all can hear me better. Sorry for the internet issues. But I think one of the things you can do to start moving beyond delivery is to work with your stakeholders and your leadership to understand, what does success for this project look like? So they're going to tell you, go integrate PayPal into our checkout flow. They're going to tell you exactly what to do. And it's your job, just like when we talk to customers, we don't just listen to what they say and throw it right into the product, right? We work backwards to the underlying issue that's trying to solve. So your job is to work with all the different stakeholders, understand what success looks like, and then you can actually maybe propose some different options. You might say, hey, we'll test integrating PayPal into our checkout flow, but if our ultimate goal is to improve revenue, there might be 10, 20, 30 different ideas that you might have on how to do that. And then you can actually go out, test a couple of ideas, and then come back to your team with the results and say, hey, business, if our goal is to improve revenue, we could implement PayPal on the checkout flow, or we could do these other things that I've found that actually we think would have a bigger impact. And that way, I think you're going to look like a rock star because ultimately you're helping the business achieve its goals. You're helping other partners achieve their goals. So those are some quick high level thoughts.
I'm curious about. I'm curious also. I think when some folks talk about delivery, there's this word that comes up, which is discovery, and it's like this other set of stuff. And I'm curious, like, because I don't think I've heard a ton of that. Like, I've definitely heard about like maybe taking ownership of delivery and bringing a PM mindset. But what are your thoughts on that in terms of like, is it the role of a product manager to be involved in discovery? Are there other things like that are beyond delivery? And is that like what? Where do you focus? Like, what's most important? Like, I think a challenge for a lot of product people is it starts to become a lot. It starts to become like, ooh, should I work like extra hours? Should I do extra work? Like, how do you deal with all that stuff? Like, what is all that stuff, and how do you deal with it all?
Yeah, the way that I think about it, or I guess the way that I have thought about it in the past, we'll see if it stands the test of time, is there's kind of three things to think about when you want to learn new skills for your career specifically. One, is it what the company and what leadership expects you to do, right? Mm-hmm. Two, is it what's actually best for your product, right? If that skill set is actually helpful. If you're working on a product that lives in a very highly regulated space, learning more about that regulatory space is probably going to be very, very helpful for the success of that product. And the last thing is it interesting to you, right? Like that is really important. No product manager can be amazing at everything, right? It's very much like we're supposed to be master of none, but pretty dang good at most things, right? But we're not supposed to be able to master everything. I also very much think that product managers should absolutely be involved in discovery. Not only should they be involved in discovery, but they should really be leading it and pushing for it. Discovery isn't a task, it's kind of a lifestyle. I know that's like very preachy, but I strongly believe that. And part of the way that you can kind of start moving into that space is understanding what happens in discovery, right? Because a lot of people think discovery and they think market research and competitive research. You might ask somebody else and they would say, you know, user personas, user interviews. You might ask somebody else and they might talk about pricing or sales or P&L, right? So discovery can really encompass a lot of things, and it's definitely a lifestyle, not something to check off of a task.
I love that. Discovery is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Next t-shirt.
I'll wear one too.
I think about discovery as really the real, like, especially leading discovery as the real progression from going from a product owner to a legitimate product manager. Even if your title is product manager and you're focused on delivery alone, that's the real difference or chasm that you need to cross to grow as a product manager. 100% believe and agree with what Allegra said, that like leading that is the responsibility of the product manager, or a good product manager at least. That doesn't mean other people in the company aren't also doing it. I think part of the responsibility of product manager is to fill gaps and like make sure shit gets done. And sometimes that means you need to focus on delivery, and other times it should be more focused on discovery. But like if a team is struggling, there's an opportunity for a product manager to get involved and get that team back on track and make sure we're actually shipping the products that we want to be shipping. I definitely believe delivery is critical, and being close to delivery is critical for all product managers. It's just shouldn't, as you want to grow in your career, it shouldn't be the sole thing that you're focused on. It is one of many things you're focused on, and you're really expanding your breadth of responsibilities. One of the like more tactical, back to the original question, one of the more tactical things you can do is begin to like lean on your collaborative partners in the product development org to take on some of those responsibilities that traditionally are oriented around delivery or being product owner. Like product owner is a set of responsibilities that need to happen to ship a product. It doesn't necessarily need to be a singular person. It can be the responsibilities of the product manager, the designer, the engineering tech lead, the engineering manager. Like they can be shared, and it varies from company to company a ton. But the way to begin to carve off more space to do discovery and do the other things that Allegra and Justin talked about is like beginning to lean more on your partners and not trying to be the hero of delivery. Recognizing that you need to balance those responsibilities.
Yeah. I'm curious too, Allegra and Adam. I've found that if you do a good job in discovery and you include your cross-functional partners, like you mentioned, that a lot of the delivery work actually becomes much easier because you've talked through all the major gotchas, right? If the entire team has been sitting around looking at the same prototype and iterating on the same prototype for the last 3 weeks, when it comes time to build, oftentimes the engineers are like, we're good, man. You know, write some user stories, write a few business rules, and we're off because we've been with you through the whole process. Whereas if you're not doing that, suddenly you are spending much more time like trying to figure stuff out while you're building it in sprint planning. And that's where you can really, get super inefficient to trying to make decisions while you're actually building the product itself.
I love that idea of like sharing examples and stories. Like I think sometimes that's why it's cool to come together in these kind of spaces, because like as much as we see diversity within the walls of our company, like getting out of our own buildings and seeing in other companies is really cool. I'm curious, like on that theme of like, you know, delivery doesn't have to be something just a product person does. It can be something shared across some different roles. Like, could you maybe talk about more examples or stories from your experience about like what might those roles be, and what are just like little vignettes or options, like real examples of how maybe that's been successful or that's failed, and trying to share deliveries so that you have a little bit more space.
Yeah, that's been an evolution for my organization. I joined Twitter via acquisition of a company called GNIP that I was at. And at GNIP and maintained for several years at Twitter, like it was expected that delivery and all of like the sprint planning and Jira management and user story writing and all that stuff was the responsibility of the product team, in addition to everything else we had to be doing. And there was kind of a culture of, I don't want to, as a tech lead or an engineering manager, like I don't want to do that stuff either. At Twitter, at GNIP, nor at Twitter have we ever had like a Scrum Master role or a product owner role. Like they don't have those positions at the company. So it's got to be filled by somebody. And at GNIP, it was the product manager, and over time that's evolved. And one of the ways we've managed that is working through the balance of the team size at any given time. Like if we're really have abundance of product managers at a time and we're short on engineering managers, like product managers need to fill that gap probably more. If we're skewed the other way, as we have been lately, like engineering managers need to own more of the process to focus on delivery. And it's a negotiation at times, depending on the individual team and skill sets and capabilities, seniority, etc. But one of the things we've done many occasions is like a biannual, like rejiggering of roles and responsibilities across product managers, tech leads, and engineering managers. We haven't historically had a lot of design on our team because we've been an API focused organization, but that like regular check-in and delineation of like who in what role is responsible for these product owner or delivery focused tasks is a helpful tip, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting with the engineering manager, just because I think like there's a lot of varying expectations from company to company. So that's a cool tip you shared.
I think something that's important, and if there are PMs on this call, I think we can all agree PMs tend to fill the gaps of things that are not being done, right? Like that's just who we are. We wouldn't get into product otherwise, most likely. And I think that can really tend to cause PMs and product owners and even senior product managers to do things that might not necessarily be that valuable, but that just have always been done, right? So just for a couple of concrete examples of ways that I've kind of not offloaded tasks, I really don't like that word, but helped kind of share the knowledge and share the responsibility is a better way of putting it, is I really love bringing designers into the story writing process. I think that the way to get people to accept a change in a process is to show them what's in it for them, right? Like even if it's the nicest, most empathetic person in the world who wants to do anything that they can for you, the real way to see progress and to see success there is to help them understand what's in it for them without actually telling them, right? Showing them is always more powerful. So for the example of the designer, what I really liked to do is, bring in a designer, have them help me write stories, or even better, have engineers and designers work together to write these stories. Then designers feel a heck of a lot better when that story is actually written, because they know, their very, very usable, very, very accessible design that they created is going to be coded correctly, and the engineer can then get that context from the designer, right? So if you can find examples and opportunities like that, where, I also really like writing stories, right? Like I don't get to do it all that often, but you don't have to give up everything, right? You don't have to, that's not the point, but if you can find those opportunities where it's a win-win for other people to gain that context, and make the process more iterative and move faster and more efficient, then that's a great way to do that.
So we have a question from Ted. Ted, are you interested in coming off mute and reading your question?
Sure, no problem. And I think, totally get it. Love being able to spend more time in discovery. The challenge in a lot of organizations is making the time, which is why the title of the talk was so important, right? It's like, what are you going to squeeze or add or reassign to be able to have the space to get the discovery going make it easier down the line. And so maybe it's just a call of, do you have any tips or ideas of how you've done that successfully? Or is it kind of, work nights and weekends and do your discovery and you'll save time later and it'll be great if you live that long?
I want to plus one what Justin said about if you involve the team in the discovery process, delivery definitely becomes easier. That might be a short-term hump for a long-term gain, if you will, of having to do both at the same time, and invest further in bringing the team along, especially a team that's not familiar with it. Allegra, Justin, you want to add?
Yeah, so it's a challenging topic, but I would say that if you're not making time for discovery, you're just not gonna, to some of the earlier points that Adam made, the trajectory of growth is about getting more strategic and doing more discovery. So one, it's absolutely critical that I think for your career progression that you figure out a way to make time for it. That also doesn't involve you, working every night and weekend and just burning yourself out. So a useful tool that Chris Jones, the guy who partners with Marty Kagan, I got from him, is to just take the next couple of weeks and allocate your time into broad categories. And I'll find the article and link in the chat, but basically see how much time you're spending on reoccurring meetings, stakeholder management. How much time are you spending on discovery today? How much time are you spending on delivery, right? And then try to focus and spend at least half of your time on discovery, because I think what you'll notice is you'll probably be super focused on delivery stuff, and then your goal is to try to get that to where you're spending half your time on discovery. One of the big ways that PMs can also do that is just to get out of meetings. So a good way to do that is one, block off your calendar, right? If you're not getting 2, 3, or 4 hours a day of heads down time, right? It's hard to be strategic. It's hard to do the deep thinking and the research that's necessary for discovery if you're just in meetings all day. So one, try to get out of meetings. And some good tools I found for that is to think about ROI versus opportunity cost, right? So thinking about ROI in a meeting is just, you say, oh, I will go to this meeting if I can be helpful or contribute, right? But think about opportunity cost, which is, well, what could I be doing if I'm not in this meeting? And think about it that way, because just because you could be there and make some kind of contribution, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good use of your time. And I think especially I know I did this when I was new to PM, where anything that was relatively about my product, like I was going to be there, right? I was going to be there and in the meeting. And then the more and further I've gone in my career, you realize like it's just not that important. Like it doesn't have to be a meeting. So that's another way to think about it. And then I'm sure a lot of us are also stuck in kind of status meeting type updates. So if at all possible, try to figure out a way to turn those into an asynchronous thing where someone can, look at your Notion template or just look in Slack and get the update. And then if you need to have a meeting to make a decision, that's fine. But try to get out of meetings that are just going to be status updates, because those will really kill your momentum.
Something else that's really tactical that I've done in the past. So I think Justin hit on kind of the big points. Try to get out of meetings, try to understand where you're spending your time. The last one that I would talk about is understand what tasks you're doing and if they're actually tasks that need to be done, right? I think a classic move of a product manager is if somebody asks for a feature one time and never asks for it again, it's probably not that important of a feature, right? It's like very basic prioritization if you want to think about it that way. One thing I've done in the past is I've thought about all of the different roles that I work closely with. I've kind of listed all of those different roles out under, including product management. I've thought about the different tasks and things that I have to do regularly, and then tried to organize them by either, yes, it's something that a product manager absolutely needs to do, or maybe, product marketing communication could be something that somebody on the marketing team wants to learn more about. Right. So that's something that I've done a lot of, where you kind of get this grid of all of these different roles and then all of these different tasks in each of those roles. You can then go through each of them and think about which one brings the most value to your product from most to least, and start thinking about that bottom layer. Either stop doing those things, right? Like, are people really going to miss them? Or think about opportunities to bring those other stakeholders in there. So not only do you understand all of your tasks, which ones are the most valuable, but you also know which potential cross-functional partner or stakeholder or whatever you want to call them, you could potentially bring that task to, or see if they, have a more automated way to do it, right? But I find that not all tasks that I have to do are necessarily ones that I should be doing. So it's good to do an audit every once in a while.
Two other quick suggestions, like especially as you're breaking into trying to do this, is one, just work further out. Like, don't try to just bite off all product discovery at once. Like, think something that you might want to work on months from now, and do a little bit over a longer period of time. The thing that's just core to product discovery is talking to your customers. Like, that's the main crux of product discovery, probably. Schedule like a minimum number of customer meetings per week if you're not talking to your customers today. Like, block an hour, or set a goal, or set a personal, like, measurable thing, like annual goal with your manager that you're going to be accountable to, of meet with one customer every week. And that kind of builds upon itself and helps shape the product discovery and wherever you're going to go with the strategy. It doesn't have to be like 3 weeks of focus time on discovery. Like, discovery can happen over a long period of time.
I think another thing.
Oh, go ahead, Allegra.
I was going to kind of maybe transition it into a different conversation, sort of, but I think there's one part of it which is, how do I make time for discovery? And then the second part of it is, if I don't have that much time, what can I be focused on? And I know that was kind of like one of our potential topics of conversation today. I'd be really curious to hear what you guys think about that. For me, it's if there's one piece of discovery you should be doing, it's understanding the metrics of your product. If you don't have a baseline for how your product is performing, how people use it, kind of how it's functioning within the space, what kind of calls you're getting, all of that. That can be a really great place to start. And you can also get a lot of information with a lot less time. It's all quantitative, right? It's not as qualitative, of course, but that can be a great place to start as well if you don't have that much time to spend on discovery.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great idea. I would just want to remind the audience, Ted, really appreciate the question. Like, I think that generated some great discussion. If anyone else has a question, please put it in the Zoom chat, and we'll try and make some space to get it answered. I do want to move on, but I do want to just touch one thing that Adam was starting to talk about, that idea of like sort of structuring something into a habit or a routine to help as sort of a guardrail. I think there's a lot of good ideas, but one of the things that can happen in being overloaded and chaos is like things fall apart and we forget, or we don't prioritize those. So I'm curious, and I may be shooting, at nothing, but I'm curious, like, are there other habits or rituals or guardrails that you've put in place where it's something you do daily, weekly, monthly that sort of help to protect your time, or do that prioritization, or like make it real, make it happen?
The habit and routine is important. And accountability is important to like make sure you maintain that. That's why I suggested the thing with your manager.
Yeah.
One of the things we've tried at times and aren't doing currently is we have a weekly team meeting, and every week somebody different is responsible for bringing a customer to that meeting to talk to our whole product team all at once, which has been interesting when we've done it in the past. Go ahead, Justin. I think you wanted to say some more too.
Oh no! Oh yeah, that's a great idea, Adam. One of the things, we definitely don't do this for every project, but there's the concept of a product discovery plan. So the basic idea is, we have a problem to solve. What's our testing plan, and how can we time box it? Because a lot of times that is one of the things that a trouble you can run into discovery is this idea that, they're just going to go off and do research for 6 months and not come back with anything to build. But if you come to your manager or your team and say, hey, here's the plan. We're going to spend 2 weeks. We're going to talk to 5 customers. We're going to test 3 designs. We're going to come back in 2 weeks with learnings and give you guys the sense of the next steps. Usually that's going to get a green light every single time, because you've sort of done all the work. You've laid it out, and the team knows that we're coming back in 2 weeks with either something to build or at least some learnings on the next set of tests we're going to run. So that's a good technique I've found really useful.
And we have another question from James. James, are you interested in?
Absolutely. I would love to ask this question. So you had mentioned earlier talking to customers weekly, if at all possible. And it seems really easy in a B2C type environment where you can put those user test testing.com pop-ups or things like that. There's a ton of services out there. What about in more of a B2B or enterprise or federal space? How do you go about finding those customers to chat with?
I have thoughts, but I'll let Allegra or Justin go first if they want.
Yeah, I can touch on this. I've lived in the B2B or B2B to C to B to C to C world quite a bit. I think part of it is making it worth it for those customers to show up in the first place, right? So if you can make it, instead of it being like an interview and into like a collaboration opportunity, I found that to be really, really powerful. So rather than, hey, come sit down and we're going to ask you 30 questions, more like, hey, here are all of these different value propositions that we're curious about. How would you prioritize these, right? Or help them envision, based on the information that you gave them, how they then fit into an outcome-oriented roadmap or the product vision in the future, right? Depending on how often you're talking to those customers. Something else that I would highly recommend as well is some sort of like a customer panel or like group. You know how you sometimes have user groups? It's very similar. I found that the most value that I've ever gotten out of customers, if it's the right space, right? Federal might be a little bit tricky, but if you can get multiple customers in the same room to talk to each other, it's fascinating, super valuable, and people really, really like talking about themselves, right? So that can be a great combination.
Yeah, customer advisory board. Yeah,
that is the words I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on, I do find that sometimes that people try to use it as an excuse, and I think no matter what industry, and you can find people who are interested who want to talk to you. Like I also spent a large portion of my career in healthcare where we work with kidney physicians, and they're like, we couldn't incentivize them because it was against government rules, and we still found, you know, and they're burnout physicians that work like 80-hour weeks, and we still found people that wanted to geek out on software. So I think you can do it regardless of industry, and if you kind of give up at the first sign of friction, you really got to push past it.
Couple concrete tactics on B2B. One, like build relationships with your cross-functional partners in marketing and sales. Product discovery doesn't have to start with an interview. It could start with a survey to narrow down to like what customers might be interesting to interview, or get some initial learnings from a survey that you can then build on or validate through interviews. And so marketing can often help you with that. Talking to your getting to know your sales team and understanding from them what prospects might be the best fit for what you're trying to learn. You don't have to drive all the meetings related to product discovery either. Like just joining sales calls and listening can learn a lot about what people are doing and struggles they're having related to your product or not that you might try to solve. And if you have a good relationship with your sales partner in that case, or account manager, you can probably ask follow-up questions and dig in without it feeling like a true interview. And if you have a relationship with your sales team, like just trying to plan for the meeting and like piggybacking on an existing time with the customer, that see if you can spend the last 10, 15 minutes focusing on something that you care about and digging into a topic or product idea or what have you, that goes beyond the original agenda of the customer. But yeah, I think you'll find like if you can make the connections to get you to the customer and through some diligence, like weed out like customers that this might be relevant to, as Justin and Allegra were suggesting, like customers like to talk about themselves. And if you're talking about something that might hypothetically solve a problem or scratch an itch for them, then they're going to be even more inclined to do so. I've actually found it easier to talk to B2B customers than B2C customers, as long as you have those relationships internally.
I love that idea of partnering and, you know, seeing how you can help other people at the same time. And I've definitely seen that be effective. I'm curious in the vein of partnering, like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people here are thinking about growing and advancing as a product leader. I mean, what role, if any, does working with your manager, working with leaders, you know, working with other members of the product team, junior or senior, maybe play into sort of a strategy of having more time for things beyond delivery at some point? Any tips or thoughts?
look for opportunities to help other people and take things off of their plate. If your manager is doing all the discovery and telling you what to do, like look for opportunities to try to take some of that off their plate, or join the like discovery calls with them and let them lead and learn from them and their skills and doing so, assuming they have them. You can, like, that's how I learned product discovery, was joining calls with product leaders that I knew how to like do it.
Yeah, I bet a lot of them would like the help too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a product nerd, and this is so embarrassing. Something that I do for fun sometimes is I'll think about a company and think about, like, I'll try and make up in my head, what do I think their product vision is? And I've actually also, when I was originally trying to learn discovery, I think it was Spotify, I put together, kind of like what Justin was saying, a discovery plan for a new feature that I like randomly made up, right? That they were probably not actually going after. The best way to learn is to apply it and to talk to people smarter than you, right? So I think that piggybacks well off of what Adam was saying too. Definitely talking to people who are smarter than you, listening in on those, maybe more experienced is a better way of saying that. But I have fun with stuff like that. I think it's a really, really, really low risk way to learn. Definitely takes a little bit more time though, but something to think about.
I love that. Like, I think a lot of the success I've had is because I've just been willing to like read stuff on the internet and try weird shit. Like I remember reading about design sprints like years ago, and I was just like, okay, team, we're gonna do this. It might suck, it might be awesome, but we're just gonna try it. And then you start doing it, and you know, you look back in a couple of years, and you're like, oh, I've done 10 design sprints now, and now it's a skill that you have, and that you can go and take it, apply at the next company, and look like a rock star. If you're just willing to kind of, you know, tell the team like, hey, just put your hand up and say, I've never done this before. I think it's gonna be fun. Let's try it. And I'm going to get feedback and iterate on it. And I think people are a lot of times willing to roll with you on it. So I think you can find a lot of power just by trying things.
Experiment and make it fun. I like those. Yeah.
I learned product from the University of Google personally.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with that. Like developers do it, designers do it. Like, why can't?
Yeah, I feel like Twitter threads right now are the best way to learn a lot of stuff.
Yeah, share your best Twitter threads in the chat.
I've got so many. There's even a website now called like Twitter Thread University for product.
Of course there is.
Of course.
The other thing I would add, that's like, I haven't done it, but I've heard it from like startup founders and stuff like that. It's like, go to a coffee shop and ask some people about if it's B2C, obviously, just like ask people about your idea. Like if you work at Spotify, and like, see if they use Spotify, if you could ask them a couple questions, or if they have this problem or do something in this space, like ask them a couple questions as a way to like train yourself to just do that.
Yeah. Even the guy, Tom Chi, who did the original Google Glass, like he literally took his prototypes to the mall, because of course this was like pre-COVID, and like people at the mall, what are you doing at the mall? Like most people are just hanging out with nothing to do. So he talked to them about that. So it's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I love that. So we have another question from Samantha, and I'm really excited. It's sort of in the startup space that I think is maybe a little bit different headspace, because you're at a different point in a company's evolution. So Samantha, would you be willing to share your question?
Yeah. So just the general being grounded in reality, and then dealing with people with these great pie in the sky ideas of the difficulty of managing their expectations and making them feel heard, but still having a realistic expectation for what that first product is going to look like. They just keep throwing ideas my way, and I'm like, yep, that's a great idea. How does that relate to our business outcomes is like the conversation, but it's kind of like a broken record. I'm just curious if anyone has experience with that and tips or tricks that worked well, and not just, I'm starting to feel like I'm placating them.
You're saying working within a startup, right?
Yeah.
Allegra or Justin, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. So there's probably a lot more context and questions we could ask, but for brevity's sake, I'll just share some more general thoughts. But basically, in a startup, I think you might have mentioned this, Samantha, but it's all about what are you focused on as a business, and what are you trying to achieve right now? And you want to stay hyper focused on that. And so any ideas that are not directly contributing to that, I think you need to have the conversation that says, like, you know, one, hear them out and get excited about it and be like, okay, cool, that's a great thought. I love that you have enough passion to bring this idea to me. But right now we're focused on achieving this outcome, and idea 1, idea 2, and idea 3 are the current top things we're testing in the market to try to get there. And if you just kind of lay it out like that and then say like, hey, but I'd love to circle back, after we launch, because we're going to pick a new focus. And at that time, I'd love to hear a lot more of your ideas around that. But just to really try to stay hyper focused on what you're doing, because in my opinion, the kind of negative places you can take it are either, and I've done this before, so I'm speaking like from direct manager feedback about stuff I did in the past that was bad, of either just saying yes but then not following through, and then people just think you're a yes person or just a flake, is a bad path that I've gone down, or just completely going the other way and just completely ignoring them. I think you want to hear them out, but reiterate what are you focused on, and then make a note to circle back with them when it's time to do the next quarterly planning session or it's time to change focuses, and get their ideas then.
Yeah, I think emphasizing like what is most important and why it's like hypothetically more impactful than what they're asking for is a big one. Go ahead, Allegra. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. And Samantha, it sounded like you are kind of doing some of that already. Having people explain to you why, or maybe not, that's a little bit too harsh, but helping them have the conversation around what business outcome of this specific new release might achieve. Something that I've done in the past, so my last role, I worked at a startup for a couple of years, and something that we did occasionally was a hypothesis and experiment readout. So especially if there was something new that was new in development that was kind of being talked about, had maybe been hyped up a little bit too much, what I really like to do was kind of outline not just a here's the features we're going to build plan, right? Because that's not really what any product manager wants to put out in the world anyways, because that's not how life tends to go. But we really tried to focus on what are we trying to prove? What are we trying to understand? What are we trying to validate? And then having an opportunity to pause and say, were we actually able to achieve the value that we thought we were able to, we thought we were going to achieve by creating, this small piece of the iteration. We know that the big product release has this value. We think it's going to be the best thing ever. But that can really get people in the mindset of, oh, it actually takes a lot more if we put some new thing in this product. It changes their mindset into, well, not only are they asking me what the business outcomes are, but how would they prove whether or not that thing was valuable? And if you can do it at a company readout where it's like, hey, in the last 4 weeks, we did this experiment for this specific product. We focused on these users, and this was the data that we saw. Because of that, we are actually going to pivot what we're doing next. We're going to reprioritize this over this, right? You can start to have those conversations, and even just kind of like giving people that under the hood look into product management can gain you a little bit more empathy and help people. The best thing in the world is when people come to you and they say, I have this idea. Here's why it's important. Here's why it's a priority. I think it's more important than these 5 things because of these reasons. What do you think, right? Rather than, I have this idea, can you put it in the next product? So just kind of like opening the hood a little bit can help a lot.
I'm curious, Allegra, you make me think of like how discovery and thinking about objectives and outcomes and whys, if it's part of a culture, can really help. And if it's not, maybe that can potentially contribute to an over-focus on delivery. What do you think there are any opportunities to sort of build a culture of discovery, and how do you think product people can sort of do that across the company? I mean, maybe it's some stuff we've already talked about, but what's the opportunity there?
That's a great question. I think it's a really hard one to figure out. It's also different. It's very different at a startup than it is at a big company, obviously. For me, from the startup perspective, again, I said this earlier, show, don't tell, right? If you can give specific examples, again, why not at a company-wide readout for 10 minutes that happens every Thursday with beers or whatever, if you're a classic startup, where you can really like read out that information of, hey, we did discovery on this, right? Because of this discovery, we determined this thing. And guess what? We're estimating that saved our developers 6 weeks of time. And now we get to build the things that you wanted us to build. And then all of a sudden people's ears perk up and they're like, ooh, this discovery thing is pretty cool, right? Like maybe if they do discovery on my thing, then they'll move it forward more quickly or what have you. But it's definitely an art. It's really hard and you can't do it all at once because people are gonna, people push back on new things, right? That's just how most people are.
Yeah, I have a couple anecdotes. As Allegra said, it's very hard. Like being able to do product discovery again is like a core skill of being a good product manager, and not everybody's going to be a good product manager. At Twitter and Connect, we've tried on numerous occasions to like train our sales and account management team to like do more of this to help us and like get it, really dig in beyond what the customer says and things like that. Has not been successful. It's hard. It's a hard thing to teach. Not everybody can do it, but that can be a good thing because you can push them to do that, and if they can't do it, they're going to leave you alone, or they might leave you alone. But the one thing you can kind of do to potentially bridge that gap is, and this has been an effective tool for even training more junior product folks, is like create a template that gets at the information that you need and very clearly outline like the questions you want to ask, and like try to get to paint the full story of what you want to understand, basically, to make the decision or to feel like this is worth exploring.
Yeah, and one final thought, really like what you all said. One final thought is also just inviting people to an actual discovery session, like inviting people to a usability test with customers. You know, it makes them appreciate how hard it's going to be. Like I remember there was one time where some developers were off in the corner kind of doing an architecture project or refactoring, and they changed a bunch of the design of the product as part of that because it felt it was going to be an improvement in consistency. So I was like, and I saw their changes, and my initial thought was like, this is not going to work at all. And so I was like, okay, guys, I hear what you're proposing. Let's test this. And so I invited them to a usability session with this was doing software for doctors, and the doctor in question just tore their design apart. And I wasn't trying to make them feel bad, but I was trying to show them is like, this is an incredibly difficult thing to do, to create something that people can use. And you've got to be okay with, users challenging your ideas. And I think it gave them a lot more empathy for how difficult the design and discovery side was. And that's why we don't just, make a bunch of changes at random.
Yeah. And we also have a really good tip in the chat. Utilize your UX researcher if you're fortunate enough to have one. I think that is an excellent tip as well. But yeah, it can be a challenge to get there for sure. All right. Dream. All right. Well, I think we're pretty close to time, and I want to make sure people, have a chance to end their days and go home and enjoy the rest of their evening. I hope that everyone here found something really, interesting, a new idea, a new option. I always find it helpful to pick like one or two things and maybe focus on that and try it. So I hope you found something. I love when people share their wisdom. So I want to thank Adam, Justin, and Allegra again for coming. And I'm sure you can find them all over the internets if you'd like to chat more. Probably in Colorado Product too. If you're not in the Slack group, highly suggest you do that. And then lastly, I'd just like to reiterate, if you haven't checked out Workit, check it out, workit.com. Really cool cohort-based career accelerator. Would love to see if maybe you'd be interested in being one of our trailblazers. And the other thing we'd appreciate too is just if you have some feedback or you have some ideas and it's something you want to be part of co-creating with us, we'd love that kind of support too. So thanks again to Adam and Colorado Product. Thanks again to everybody who showed up here and for asking great questions. And we're going to be having some more events in the summer. So keep an eye out and have a lovely evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you, Adam, and the Workit team.
Thanks for having us. Bye.